Hey guys, tonight we stumble into the muddy, torchlit world of a medieval village where a pig's about to face justice in a courtroom stranger than a fever dream. Picture yourself trudging down a rutted path, the air sharp with wood smoke, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. A crowd gathers near a ramshackle barn, their faces lit by flickering light, muttering about a crime that's got everyone on edge. It's not a thief or a bandit in the dock this time. It's a sow accused of a deed so shocking it's ripped the village apart. Fair warning, you probably won't survive the sheer weirdness of a pig trial without questioning everything you know about justice. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a village square, your boots sinking into the damp earth, the crowd's murmurs buzzing like bees. It's 15th century France, and the air's thick with the smell of hay and unwashed wool. The pig, a hefty sow with bristly hair, is penned in a makeshift enclosure, her snout sniffing the air, as if she knows she's the star of this grim show. You overhear a farmer, his face creased with anger, recounting how the pig trampled a child in a muddy yard, a tragedy that's left the village baying for justice. Historical records like those from the Burgundian courts confirm that animal trials were real, with pigs often hauled before judges for crimes like crop destruction or worse, harming humans. This sow's not just livestock anymore. She's a defendant. You shift closer, dodging a kid who's chucking pebbles at the pen, and catch the eye of a woman clutching a shawl. She's cursed that beast, she whispers, crossing herself. A quirky tidbit floats up: some villagers believed animals could be possessed by demons, making trials a way to purge evil from the community. You're not sure if this pig's got a devil in her or just bad manners, but the crowd's ready to see her pay. Historians still argue whether these trials were about justice or superstition. Some say they enforced order. Others call them a bizarre mix of faith and fear. For now, you're stuck in the middle, watching torchlight dance on the pig's back. The crowd parts as a figure in a dark cloak strides forward, a local official, maybe a bailiff, his voice booming for order. He's here to kick off the process, to turn this muddy tragedy into a legal spectacle. You notice the pig's pen is reinforced with extra rope, as if she's planning a jailbreak. A kid nearby snickers and thinks she'll plead guilty. You stifle a laugh, but the mood's heavy, the village's grief and rage hanging like fog. The bailiff calls for witnesses, and hands shoot up, eager to point fingers at the sow. You're not sure what's weirder, that they're trying a pig, or that everyone's acting like it's normal. You're swept along as the crowd shifts toward the village hall, where the trial will unfold. The pig's dragged behind in her pen, grunting like she's annoyed at the inconvenience. You're starting to see the gears of this odd bureaucracy: clerics, lawyers, judges, all ready to treat this sow like a proper criminal. It's absurd, but there's a strange logic to it. A community grasping for control after chaos. You clutch your cloak against the evening chill, wondering how a pig ended up in this mess, and what kind of lawyer takes her case. For now, you trudge with the crowd, the village square fading behind you, ready to see this bizarre justice unfold. You trudge with the torch-lit crowd, the pig's grunts echoing from her roped pen as the village hall looms ahead, its timber walls weathered by rain and time. The air's sharp with the tang of smoke and nervous sweat, and your boots squelch in the mud, blending with the murmurs of villagers hungry for justice. Inside, the hall's dim, lit by tallow candles that flicker like judgmental eyes. You squeeze onto a bench, shoulder to shoulder with a baker who smells faintly of rye, and watch the villager's anger focus on the penned sow, her bristly bulk oddly calm amid the chaos. You're about to witness the accusation phase where the community lays out the pig's crime with all the gravitas of a human trial, and it's as surreal as it sounds. The bailiff from the square stands at the front, his cloak swapped for a stern expression, and calls for silence. This beast has wrought harm, he declares, pointing at the pig, who's busy sniffing a stray straw. The crowd roars, and you catch snippets of the story. The sow loose in a yard, trampled a toddler, leaving the family shattered. A woman, likely the mother, sobs in the corner, her grief fueling the room's rage. Historical records like those from 15th century French legal texts show pigs were often tried for such acts, their trials mirroring human ones with formal charges and witnesses. This pig's no pet. She's a menace in the village's eyes. A farmer steps forward, his hands gnarled from years in the fields, and points at the sow. She broke the fence, charged the child. Saw it myself, he shouts, spittle flying. The crowd nods, some crossing themselves as if the pig's malice was planned. A quirky tidbit: some villagers believed animals could sin their actions, reflecting divine or demonic will, making trials a way to cleanse the community. You glance at the sow, wondering if she's plotting her next rampage or just craving slop. The baker beside you mutters, "Ought to roast her now," and you nod, half joking, with or without applesauce. More accusers line up. A neighbor saw the pig rooting near the yard. Another claims she's always been trouble. Their stories pile up, each adding weight to the sow's guilt, though you're not sure if they're describing a crime or just bad pig manners. Historians still argue whether these accusations were about accountability or scapegoating. Some say they channeled grief, others call them a way to dodge human negligence, like that flimsy fence. You're starting to see the village's pain, but the pig's blank stare makes you wonder who's really on trial here. The bailiff scribbles notes on a parchment, his quill scratching like a disapproving tisk. He's building the case, turning raw anger into something legal. And you're struck by the formality: candles, witnesses, a penned defendant, all for a sow. A kid nearby whispers, "Thinks she'll squeal on herself," and you stifle a chuckle, earning a glare from a pious-looking woman. The mood's heavy, the mother's sobs a constant undertow, and you're caught between pity and the absurdity of it all. The pig, oblivious, chews on her straw, a four-legged outlaw in a world that's lost its grip. You shift on the bench, the wood creaking, as the bailiff calls for the cleric to step up next. The trial's gears are turning, and you're about to see how a man of the cloth fits into this bizarre bureaucracy, recording the pig's sins for posterity. For now, you lean forward, the hall's smoky air stinging your eyes, ready to watch this odd justice grind on the sow's fate, hanging in the balance like a storm cloud over the village. You're crammed on this village hall's creaky bench, the smoky air thick with the scent of tallow and tension, as the pig's grunts punctuate the crowd's murmurs. The sow, penned at the front, munches straw like she's unbothered by the villagers' glares, or the mother's muffled sobs echoing from the corner. The bailiff steps back, his parchment of accusations rolled tight, and a new figure shuffles forward, a cleric, his black robes frayed at the hem, clutching a quill and a leather-bound book. His job is to record the pig's offense for the church and court, turning this muddy tragedy into an official act of medieval justice. You're about to see his world, and it's a strange mix of faith, ink, and bureaucratic obsession. The cleric, pale and squinting in the candlelight, clears his throat and begins reading the charges in a voice that's half prayer, half lecture. On this day, the sow property of one Guillaume did willfully harm a child. He intones his quill scratching as he notes the crowd's nods. You're struck by the formality. Every grunt and squeal is being immortalized, like it's a papal decree. Historical records like those from ecclesiastical courts in 15th century Europe show clerics often played key roles in animal trials, lending divine weight to secular justice and ensuring God's law wasn't mocked by a rogue pig. This guy's not just a scribe, he's the village's link to the heavens. You lean closer, dodging the baker's elbow, and watch the cleric dip his quill in a horn of ink. His hands trembling slightly, maybe from cold, maybe from the weight of the task. A quirky tidbit: some clerics believed animals could be excommunicated, casting them out of God's grace like heretical humans. You glance at the sow, wondering if she's about to get a spiritual timeout, and stifle a chuckle. The baker catches your smirk and whispers, "Think he'll bless the pig first." You shrug, muttering, "Only if she confesses." His snort earns a scowl from a nearby matron. The cleric's work isn't just scribbling. He's weaving the pig's crime into a moral narrative. His words laced with references to sin and divine order. He pauses to question a witness, a shaky old woman who swears the pig looked possessed before the incident. His quill dances, capturing her tale, and you're starting to see how this bureaucracy thrives on stories, not just facts. Historians still argue whether clerics in these trials were genuine believers or just cogs in a legal machine. Some say they saw animals as moral agents. Others claim they were humoring superstitious villagers. Either way, you're mesmerized by the cleric's focus, his book a growing testament to this bizarre drama. He finishes his entry with a flourish, sprinkling sand to dry the ink, and you notice the crowd's gone quieter, as if his words have made the pig's guilt official. The sow, oblivious, flicks her tail, and a kid in the back giggles. She's writing her own defense, you grin, but the cleric's stern glance shuts down the levity. Remember that demon-possessed pig theory from the village square? This guy's probably half convinced it's true, his book a shield against whatever evil the sow's hiding. The bailiff nods, signaling the next step, and you're ready to see how this case moves from parchment to courtroom. You shift on the bench, the wood digging into your thighs, as the cleric tucks his book under his arm and steps aside. The hall's candles flicker, casting shadows on the pig's pen, and the crowd's restlessness grows eager for the legal circus to escalate. You're about to meet the officials who'll summon the pig to court, turning this scribbled accusation into a full-blown trial. For now, you rub your eyes against the smoke, the sow's grunts a steady beat, and brace for the next twist in this medieval madness. You're still wedged on the village hall's splintery bench. The cleric's quill scratches, fading as he steps back, his book of pig sins tucked under his arm. The air's heavy with candle smoke, and the crowd's restless buzz, the sow's grunts a low hum from her straw-strewn pen. The bailiff takes center stage again, his cloak flapping as he calls for order. But now he's joined by a pair of stern-faced officials, village aldermen, maybe their tunics stiff with self-importance. They're here to issue the legal summons, formally dragging the pig into the court's clutches, and you're about to watch this bizarre bureaucracy crank into high gear. It's as absurd as it sounds, and you're hooked. The taller official, with a beard like a tangled hedge, unrolls a parchment and reads in a voice that could wake a hibernating bear. By order of this court, The sow of Guillaume is summoned to answer for her crimes, he bellows, gesturing at the pig who's busy rooting in her pen like she's auditioning for a truffle hunt. The crowd murmurs, some nodding, solemnly others stifling snickers. You're half expecting the pig to nod back, but she just flicks an ear. Historical records like those from French municipal archives confirm that animals were formally summoned in medieval trials, often with parchments served to their owners, or in some cases read aloud to the beast itself. This sow's getting the full legal treatment. You shift, dodging the baker's elbow again, and watch the second official, a wiry man with a permanent squint, stride toward the pen. He holds the parchment aloft, reading the summons directly to the pig, his voice rising over her grunts. You are to appear before the judge, he declares, and you bite your lip to keep from laughing. A quirky tidbit: some towns tied summonses to animals' tails or collars, believing it made the process official. You imagine this guy pinning a scroll to the sow's bristly back and whisper to the baker, think she'll RSVP. He snorts. Only if there's slop at the hearing. The official's job isn't just theatrics. They're ensuring the trial follows protocol, from notifying the pig's owner, poor Guillaume, probably hiding in shame, to scheduling the court date. You notice them conferring with the bailiff, pointing at the parchment like it's a battle plan. The crowd's eating it up, some shouting for a swift trial, others muttering about curses. Historians still argue whether these summonses were serious legal steps or performative rituals. Some say they upheld community order, others call them a way to soothe superstitious fears. You're starting to see the logic. A grieving village needs structure, even if it's pinned on a pig. The tall official rolls up the parchment, tucking it into his belt, while the wiry one shoos a kid who's tossing straw at the pen. Respect the court, he snaps, though you're not sure if he means the pig or the process. The sow, oblivious, chews a rope, and you're struck by the surreal clash of formality and farce. Remember that excommunication threat from the cleric? These officials seem just as convinced the pig understands her summons, their faces grim, as if she's a mastermind plotting her next crime. You stifle a chuckle, earning a glare from a pious woman nearby. You're ready to move on the bench, creaking as you shift the hall's smoky air, stinging your eyes. The officials step back, their summons delivered, and the crowd's restlessness spikes, eager for the trial's next act. You're about to meet the strangest player yet, the lawyer tasked with defending the pig, a job that's half courage, half madness. For now, you rub your hands against the chill, the pig's grunts a steady reminder of the absurdity binding this village together, and brace for the courtroom's next twist. You're still packed into the village hall, the smoky air buzzing with anticipation as the officials step back, their parchment summons now just a formality in the sow's indifferent world. The pig penned at the front snorts through her straw pile, oblivious to the crowd's glares, or the faint sobs still drifting from the grieving mother in the corner. The bailiff clears his throat, and a new figure shuffles forward, a lanky man in a threadbare robe, his face a mix of resignation and defiance. This is the animal attorney, the poor soul assigned to defend the pig in this medieval courtroom circus. You're about to dive into his world, where arguing for a sow's innocence is as thankless as it is bizarre, and you're already rooting for him to pull off a miracle. The attorney adjusts his robe, which looks like it's been through one too many tavern brawls, and faces the crowd. I speak for the accused, he declares, gesturing at the pig, who flicks her tail like she's dismissing him. A ripple of snickers runs through the hall, but his expression stays grim, as if he's defending a nobleman, not livestock. Historical records like those from 15th century French legal annals show that animal trials often included Appointed lawyers, sometimes monks or junior clerks, tasked with ensuring a fair process even for a pig. This guy's got the toughest job in the village, and you can tell he knows it. He starts his opening plea, his voice steady but laced with a hint of sarcasm. "The sow is no murderer, but a beast of instinct," he says, dodging a stray apple core tossed by a heckler. You're impressed. He's weaving a case from thin air, arguing the pig lacked intent. A quirky tidbit. Some lawyers claimed animals were God's creatures, incapable of sin, using theology to dodge death sentences. You glance at the sow, wondering if she's secretly a saint, and whisper to the baker beside you. "Think he'll call her a holy hog," he snorts. "Only if she sprouts wings." The attorney's job is a tightrope walk. He's got to sound convincing, without mocking the court, all while knowing the crowd's baying for pig blood. You watch him pace, gesturing at the pen, his robe flapping like a tired flag. He questions the pig's character, asking if she's ever harmed before, though the crowd's shouts of yes drown him out. Historians still argue whether these lawyers believed in their cases or just played along. Some say they saw it as a moral duty, others call them pawns in a superstitious charade. Either way, you're gripped by his nerve, standing up to a room that's already convicted the sow in their hearts. He pauses, wiping sweat from his brow, and locks eyes with the bailiff, daring him to interrupt. The pig, meanwhile, chews a rope, her nonchalance almost admirable. You notice the attorney's hands shake slightly, nerves maybe, or just the weight of defending a client who can't even grunt a thank you. Remember that summons tied to a pig's tail. This guy's probably wishing he could bolt like that parchment. A kid nearby giggles. "He's gonna lose to a pig," and you mutter, "At least she's got better manners." The pious woman's glare is back, but you're too hooked to care. You shift on the bench, the wood creaking under you, as the attorney wraps up his opening, promising to call witnesses. Good luck with that. The hall's candles flicker, casting shadows on the pig's bristly back, and the crowd's restlessness grows hungry for the trial's meat. You're about to see the courtroom itself come alive, where this odd bureaucracy will play out in full. For now, you rub your eyes against the smoke, the sow's snorts, a steady rhythm, and brace for the next act in this medieval madness, wondering how the attorney's going to spin this one. You're still wedged on the village hall's creaky bench, the air thick with candle smoke, and the crowd's restless hum as the pig's attorney steps back, his plea for the sow's innocence hanging like a fragile thread. The pig penned at the front grunts through her straw, oblivious to the glares or the faint sobs still seeping from the grieving mother's corner. The bailiff bangs a staff on the floor, and the room shifts focus to a raised platform, where a table draped in faded cloth awaits the judge. You're about to enter the courtroom itself, a buzzing hive of odd procedures, where this pig trial will unfold with all the pomp of a human case, and it's as bewildering as it is gripping. You shuffle forward with the crowd, finding a spot near the platform, your boots scuffing the dirt floor. The courtroom's a makeshift affair, wooden benches, flickering candles, and a crude wooden cross on the wall, nodding to the church's shadow over this legal farce. The pig's pen is dragged closer, her snorts echoing as villagers cram in, some perched on barrels for a better view. Historical records like those from 15th century Burgundian courts describe animal trials as formal spectacles, with courtrooms mimicking human proceedings down to oaths and evidence rules. This sow's getting a trial fit for a thief, and you're not sure whether to laugh or wince. The bailiff calls for order, and a clerk different from the cleric arranges parchments on the table, his ink-stained fingers moving like a nervous spider. He's setting up the trial's framework, witness lists, charges, and a space for the judge's ruling. A quirky tidbit. Some courts dressed animals in human clothes for trials, though this pig's spared the indignity of a bonnet, probably because she'd eat it. You whisper to the baker beside you. Think they'll make her swear on a Bible? He snickers, only if she can hoof the pages. A nearby matron's glare shuts you up, but the absurdity's infectious. The courtroom's procedures are a strange brew of law and theater. You watch the clerk sprinkle sand on a fresh parchment, ready to record every word, while the bailiff swears in the crowd as witnesses to justice. The pig, meanwhile, flicks her tail, and you're struck by the contrast solemn oaths for a sow who's more interested in slop than salvation. Historians still argue whether these setups were about upholding law or performing for the community. They reinforced social order. Others call them a way to channel grief into ritual. You're starting to see the village's need for this spectacle, a way to tame the chaos of a child's death. The crowd's buzzing grows as the judge's arrival looms, and you notice the attorney whispering to the clerk, maybe begging for a lenient bench. The pig's pen creaks as she shifts, drawing a few gasps from villagers who swear she's plotting escape. Remember that excommunication threat from the cleric? The courtroom's cross seems to loom larger now, as if the pig's soul is on trial too. A kid nearby giggles. She's gonna bolt for the hills, and you mutter, with her lawyer's luck she might. The mood's tense, the mother's sobs a quiet undercurrent, and you're caught between the trial's gravity and its sheer weirdness. You settle into your spot, the platform's candles casting shadows on the pig's bristly back as the bailiff signals the trial's start. The courtroom's alive, a stage for the prosecutor to make his case against the sow, and you're ready to see this bizarre bureaucracy in action. For now, you rub your hands against the hall's chill, the pig's grunts a steady beat, and brace for the next twist in this medieval drama, wondering how anyone keeps a straight face in a room where a pig's the defendant. You're pressed into the village hall's makeshift courtroom, the air thick with the tang of sweat and sputtering candles as the pig's grunts punctuate the crowd's restless hum from her pen near the platform. The sow oblivious to the looming cross, or the faint sobs still drifting from the grieving mother roots in her straw, like it's just another day. The bailiff bangs his staff, and a stocky man in a dark cloak strides to the center, a prosecutor, his face carved with grim purpose. He's here to lay out the case against the pig, turning the village's rage into a legal hammer, and you're about to watch this bizarre trial kick into high gear. It's a performance as much as a prosecution, and you're glued to every word. The prosecutor clears his throat, his voice booming like a sermon. This beast, this sow, has spilled innocent blood, he declares, pointing at the pig, who flicks her tail as if swatting his words away. He recounts the tragedy: the pig loose in a yard, trampled a child, leaving a family broken, and the village cursed. The crowd roars, some shaking fists, others crossing themselves. Historical records like those from 15th century French court rolls show prosecutors in animal trials treated beasts as moral agents, arguing they knowingly broke God's order. This guy's painting the pig as a villain, and the room's eating it up. He paces his cloak, swirling, and calls the farmer from the accusation phase as his first witness. You saw the beast charge, did you not? He presses, and the farmer nods, his voice shaky but certain. Straight for the child, like a devil's work. You're struck by the prosecutor's skill weaving grief into evidence. though you wonder if the pig was just hungry, not homicidal. A quirky tidbit: some prosecutors claimed animals could be swayed by Satan, making trials a cosmic battle. You glance at the sow, half expecting horns, and whisper to the baker. Think she's got a pitchfork hidden, he snickers. Only if she's baking brimstone pies. The prosecutor's case builds. He cites the broken fence, the pig's history of rooting, even her menacing grunt, as if she's been plotting chaos all along. You're impressed by his flair, but it's hard to take seriously when the defendant's chewing rope. He gestures at the mother, her sobs now silent, but her presence a weight, and the crowd's anger spikes. Historians still argue whether these arguments were about justice or theater. Some say they gave closure. Others call them a way to dodge human fault, like shoddy fences. You're starting to see the prosecutor's role. He's channeling the village's pain, giving it a target, even if it's a pig. He wraps up, demanding justice for the fallen, his voice cracking for effect. The pig, unfazed, snorts, and a kid in the back giggles. She's pleading not guilty, you mutter. With that attitude, she's winning. The pious woman's glare is back, but you're too hooked to care. The prosecutor steps back, his cloak settling like a storm cloud, and the bailiff nods to the attorney, signaling the defense's turn. Remember that saintly pig theory from the lawyer's plea? You're curious if he'll lean into it or try something crazier. You shift on your spot, the dirt floor cold under your boots, as the courtroom's candles flicker, casting shadows on the pig's bristly back. The crowd's buzzing, hungry for the defense to counter this fiery case, and you're ready to see how the attorney fights for a sow who's more interested in straw than salvation. For now, you rub your eyes against the smoke, the pig's grunts a steady rhythm, and brace for the next act in this medieval madness, wondering if the lawyer's got any tricks left to save his client. You're still packed into the village hall's smoky courtroom, the flicker of candles casting jittery shadows on the pig's pen where the sow chews straw with the nonchalance of a bored monarch. The prosecutor's fiery words linger, the crowd's anger buzzing like a hornet's nest, punctuated by the grieving mother's quiet sniffles. The bailiff bangs his staff, and the lanky attorney from before steps forward, his threadbare robe flapping as he faces the hostile room. It's time for the defense's plea, where he'll try to save the pig from the noose, or worse, with arguments as shaky as the hall's dirt floor. You're about to watch him weave a case for a client who can't even grunt a thank you, and it's a masterclass in courage or folly. The attorney clears his throat, his voice steady despite the crowd's jeers. This sow is no fiend, but a creature of God's making. He begins gesturing at the pig, who flicks her tail like she's bored with his sermon. He argues she lacked malice, driven by hunger, not evil, when she broke the fence and trampled the child. The room hisses, but he presses on, citing the owner's negligence, Guillaume's flimsy fence, as the true culprit. Historical records like those from medieval French legal texts show defense attorneys often blamed human error or divine will to spare animals, framing them as unwitting tools. You're impressed by his guts, taking on a village out for blood. He paces, dodging a thrown apple core, rude, but points for aim, and calls the pig a humble beast, incapable of sin. A quirky tidbit. Some defense pleas invoked biblical stories like Balaam's donkey speaking God's truth to argue animals could be divine instruments. You glance at the sow, half expecting her to recite scripture, and whisper to the baker. Think she'll quote Psalms, he snickers, only if it's about slop. The pious woman's glare burns hotter, but you're too gripped to care. The attorney's plea is a tightrope walk, blending theology and logic to a crowd that wants pork chops, not parables. His argument leans on the pig's nature. She's no murderer, just a sow doing sow things. He questions the witnesses' tales, suggesting the child wandered too close, a tragic accident, not a crime. The crowd boos, but you see a few heads nod, maybe swayed by his point about the fence. Historians still argue whether these defenses were sincere or just legal. Theater, some say lawyers believed in animal innocence. Others call it a ploy to uphold trial fairness. You're starting to feel for the attorney, his voice cracking, as he pleads for mercy, knowing the pig's fate is probably sealed. He wraps up his robe, sagging like his spirits, and asks the court to spare the sow, suggesting exile to a farm over execution. The pig, oblivious, grunts, and a kid in the back yells, "She's hired him for life," you mutter. Lucky her, he's working pro bono. The mood's tense, the mother's presence a heavy anchor, and the attorney steps back, his plea hanging like mist. Remember that Satan-swayed pig theory from the prosecutor? The defense's holy hog angle is a bold counter, but you're not sure it's enough to sway this crowd. You shift on your spot, the dirt floor gritty under your boots, as the courtroom's candles sputter, illuminating the pig's bristly bulk. The crowd's buzzing grows eager for witnesses to flesh out this strange case, and you're ready to see who'll testify about a sow's character or lack thereof. For now, you rub your hands against the hall's chill, the pig's snorts, a steady beat, and brace for the next twist in this medieval drama, wondering if the attorney's words will outshine the village's thirst for justice. You're still crammed in the village hall's smoky courtroom, the air thick with the scent of tallow and tension, as the pig's snorts cut through the crowd's restless murmurs. The sow penned near the platform roots in her straw, unfazed by the attorney's plea or the prosecutor's fiery accusations. The bailiff bangs his staff, silencing a heckler, and calls for witnesses to testify about the pig's behavior, turning this bizarre trial into a parade of village gossip. You're about to hear the community's tales, some heartfelt, some absurd, about a sow they've already condemned, and it's a mix of grief, grudges, and medieval drama that keeps you riveted. The first witness, the farmer from the accusation phase, shuffles forward, his hands knotted like old rope. "That pig's a menace," he growls, recounting how she broke his fence twice before the tragedy, rooting up crops and glaring at his kids. The crowd nods, and you wonder if the glare was just her squinting at a carrot. Historical records like those from 15th century French court logs show witness testimonies in animal trials were crucial, often piling on anecdotes to prove a beast's guilty nature. This farmer's painting the sow as a one-pig crime wave, and the room's eating it up. Next up is a wiry woman, her shawl slipping as she points at the pen. "She chased my geese last spring," she shrieks, claiming the pig's chaos drove her flock to ruin. You're not sure if it's evidence or a personal vendetta, but her voice carries the weight of a scorned neighbor. A quirky tidbit: some witnesses swore animals recognized their crimes, citing shameful behavior like hiding after misdeeds. You glance at the sow, who's chewing a rope with zero remorse, and whisper to the baker, "Think she's pleading the fifth?" He snickers. With that face, she's guilty of boredom. The pious woman's glare could melt iron, but you're too hooked to care. A third witness, a nervous boy barely taller than the pen, mumbles about seeing the pig near the tragic yard, looking angry before the child's death. His testimony's shaky, prodded by the prosecutor's leading questions, and you feel a pang for the kid caught in this adult mess. The crowd's murmurs grow, some shouting for justice, others muttering about curses. Historians still argue whether these testimonies were about truth or catharsis. Some say they gave voice to grief, others call them a way to pile blame on a beast instead of a village's failings, like that flimsy fence. You're starting to see the trial as a mirror reflecting pain more than proof. The bailiff calls a halt, the witnesses stepping back their tails, a tangled web of fact and feud. The pig, oblivious, flicks her tail, and a kid in the back yells, "She's laughing at us," you mutter, "or at your haircut, buddy." The mood's heavy, the mother's silent presence a constant weight, and you're caught between the trial's absurdity and its raw emotion. Remember that holy hog defense. These witnesses are burying it under a mountain of grudges, and the attorney's face says he knows it. You shift on your spot, the dirt floor cold under your boots, as the courtroom's candles sputter, casting shadows on the pig's bristly bulk. The crowd's buzzing settles, eyes turning to the judge's empty chair, ready for his deliberation to seal the sow's fate. You're about to watch the trial's climax, where this odd bureaucracy weighs a pig's life against a village's pain. For now, you rub your eyes against the smoke. The pig's grunts a steady rhythm, and brace for the next act in this medieval saga, wondering if justice here is blind or just bewildered. You're still squeezed into the village hall's smoky courtroom, the air heavy with the sting of tallow, and the crowd's restless hum as the pig's snorts punctuate the fading echoes of witness testimonies. The sow penned near the platform roots in her straw, indifferent to the farmer's grudges, or the geese chasing tails that have painted her as the village's public enemy. The bailiff bangs his staff, and a new figure rises, a judge, his gray beard and stern eyes giving him the look of a man who's seen too many feuds, human or hog. You're about to watch him deliberate the pig's fate, weighing a sow's life against a village's pain in this bizarre medieval courtroom, and it's a moment as tense as it is absurd. The judge settles at the cloth-draped table, his hands folded like he's praying for sanity, and surveys the room. The crowd quiets, even the hecklers holding their breath, as he reviews the cleric's parchment of charges and the witnesses' tales. "This beast stands accused of grave harm," he intones, glancing at the pig who flicks her tail like she's swatting his words. Historical records like those from 15th century French legal annals show judges in animal trials followed strict protocols, balancing secular law with church doctrine to ensure justice for all God's creatures. This guy's got to decide if the sow's a criminal or just a clumsy beast, and you're not envying his job. He questions the attorney first, his voice sharp. "You claim no malice yet, the child is gone. What say you to intent?" The attorney, sweat beading on his brow, doubles down on the pig's instincts and Guillaume's shoddy fence, but the crowd's murmurs drown him out. A quirky tidbit. Some judges consulted omens like a bird's flight or a candle's flicker to guide verdicts, believing God spoke through signs. You notice the judge eyeing a sputtering candle and whisper to the baker, "Think he'll ask the pig's horoscope?" He snickers, only if it predicts bacon. The pious woman's glare is practically a weapon now, but you're too gripped to care. The judge turns to the prosecutor, who repeats his call for divine justice, pointing at the grieving mother's shadowed corner to hammer the emotional weight. You feel the room's grief tighten, but the judge's face stays stone, scribbling notes as he weighs the sow's character against the village's loss. Historians still argue whether these deliberations were about law or appeasement. Some say judges sought fairness, others call them a way to pacify angry communities while dodging deeper issues like poverty or neglect. You're starting to see the trial as a ritual, a way to stitch a torn village back together, even if it's over a pig's head. He pauses, stroking his beard, and the silence is deafening, broken only by the pig's grunt, like she's casting her own vote. A kid in the back whispers, "He's gonna fry her," and you mutter, "Or make her mayor." The mood's a tightrope, the mother's presence a silent anchor, and you're caught between the trial's gravity and its sheer weirdness. Remember that biblical donkey defense. The judge seems unmoved by theology, his eyes fixed on the pen as if he's searching the sow's soul or lack thereof. You shift on your spot, the dirt floor gritty under your boots, as the courtroom's candles flicker, casting shadows on the pig's bristly bulk. The crowd's tension spikes, eyes locked on the judge, ready for his verdict to drop like a hammer. You're about to hear the sow's fate, the climax of this odd bureaucracy's grind. For now you rub your hands against the hall's chill, the pig's snorts a steady rhythm, and brace for the next twist in this medieval drama, wondering if the judge will lean toward mercy or the village's thirst for retribution. You're still packed into the village hall's smoky courtroom, the air thick with the bite of tallow, and the crowd's taut silence as the pig's grunts echo from her straw-strewn pen. The sow, oblivious to the judge's stern gaze or the grieving mother's shadowed presence, flicks her tail like she's dismissing the whole ordeal. The judge, his beard a gray tangle, rises from the table, his parchment notes clutched tight, and the room holds its breath. You're about to hear the verdict the moment this bizarre bureaucracy decides the pig's fate, and it's a mix of dread and absurdity that has you leaning forward, caught in the medieval drama's grip. The judge's voice cuts through the hush, steady but heavy. "The sow having caused death is guilty," he declares, and the crowd erupts, some cheering, others crossing themselves, a few muttering about curses. He raises a hand, silencing them, and details the crime, the pig's reckless charge, the broken fence, the child's loss. Historical records like those from 15th century French court logs show animal verdicts often mirrored human ones, with guilty beasts facing execution or exile to restore community order. This sow's not getting a pardon, and you're not surprised given the village's rage. He pauses, glancing at the pig who's chewing a rope with the focus of a scholar. "The penalty is death," he adds, specifying a public hanging to cleanse the village. You wince, picturing the logistics, and whisper to the baker, "Think they'll knit her a tiny noose," he snickers. "Only if it's hemp chic." A quirky tidbit: some towns dressed condemned animals in human clothes for execution, a grim nod to their crimes. You're relieved the judge skipped that detail. This sow's bristly enough without a bonnet. The pious woman's glare is back, but you're too hooked to care. The attorney slumps, his robe sagging like his hopes, while the prosecutor nods smugly, as if he's vanquished a dragon, not a pig. The crowd's reaction splits, some shout for justice, others look uneasy, maybe questioning if a sow's death heals anything. Historians still argue whether these verdicts were about closure or control. Some say they soothed grieving communities, others call them a way to dodge human accountability, like Guillaume's shoddy fence. You're starting to see the verdict as a bandage covering the village's wound, without addressing its deeper pain. The judge hands his parchment to the clerk, who sprinkles sand to dry the ink, sealing the sow's fate in bureaucratic ink. The pig unfazed grunts, and a kid in the back yells. "She's appealing with a squeal," you mutter, "better lawyer than hers." The mood's heavy, the mother's silent grief a constant weight, and you're caught between the trial's finality and its oddity. Remember that omen-checking judge. This one's verdict feels grounded in the village's need for action, not candles or birds, but it's no less surreal. You shift on your spot, the dirt floor cold under your boots, as the courtroom's candles sputter, casting shadows on the pig's bristly bulk. The crowd's buzzing grows, some already pushing toward the exit, eager to see the sentence carried out. You're about to follow the process to its grim conclusion, where the pig's punishment becomes a public spectacle. For now, you rub your eyes against the smoke, the pig's snorts, a fading rhythm, and brace for the next act in this medieval saga, wondering how a village turns a sow's death into justice. You're swept along with the restless crowd spilling out of the village hall's smoky courtroom. Into the chilly dusk, the pig's grunts muffled as her pen is dragged behind. The air bites your face sharp with wood smoke and the tang of damp earth, but the village square hums with torchlit tension. The sow, still rooting in her straw, faces her final act, a public execution to seal the court's verdict. You're about to witness the punishment process where this bizarre bureaucracy turns a pig's death into a grim spectacle, and it's a mix of medieval ritual and raw emotion that leaves you uneasy yet unable to look away. The bailiff leads the procession, his staff thumping the ground as villagers cluster around a gnarled oak at the square's edge where a rope dangles like a grim promise. The pig's pen is positioned beneath, and she snorts, oblivious to the noose or the crowd's murmurs. The executioner, a burly man in a hooded cloak, checks the rope with practiced hands, his face hidden but his silence loud. Historical records like those from 15th century French chronicles confirm that animal executions were public affairs, often mimicking human punishments to restore order and deter chaos. This sow's hanging is meant to cleanse the village, but you're not sure it'll heal the mother's sobs echoing in your memory. A cleric, not the one from the trial, but a dour substitute, steps forward, sprinkling holy water on the pen and muttering a prayer to ward off evil. A quirky tidbit. Some executions included last rites for animals as if their souls needed saving. You glance at the sow, half expecting her to kneel and whisper to the baker who's followed you out. Thinks she'll get a pig-sized halo, he snickers, only if heaven's serving slop. The pious woman's nearby, her glare sharper than the executioner's knife, but you're too gripped to care. The crowd's mood splits. Some shout for justice, others stand silent, their faces uneasy as the ropes looped around the sow's neck. The executioner works quickly, hoisting the pig with a pulley, her squeals brief but piercing before she goes limp. You wince, the act swift but brutal, and the crowd's cheers feel hollow against the mother's distant grief. Historians still argue whether these punishments were cathartic or cruel. Some say they unified communities, others call them a distraction from human failures, like that flimsy fence Guillaume never fixed. You're starting to see the hanging as a ritual, a way to bury pain under spectacle, even if it leaves a sour taste. The executioner cuts the rope, the sow's body thudding to the ground, and the crowd begins to disperse, some muttering prayers, others already debating supper. The bailiff oversees the cleanup, ensuring the pig's carcass is carted off, likely to a butcher, not a shrine. You notice a few villagers linger, staring at the oak, as if expecting divine approval. Remember that holy hog defense, it's dust now. The sow's death, a stark end to the trial's theatrics. A kid nearby kicks a stone, muttering, "She didn't even fight." You reply, smarter than most lawyers. His grin cuts the tension, but the square feels heavier than before. You step back, your boots sinking into the mud as the torches flicker, casting long shadows over the now empty pen. The village's pulse slows, but the execution's weight lingers a grim cap to the courtroom's chaos. You're about to meet the scribe who'll record this outcome, sealing the pig's fate in ink for posterity. For now, you rub your hands against the evening chill, the sow's final squeal, a fading echo, and brace for the next twist in this medieval saga, wondering how a village moves on from a trial that feels more like a wound than a resolution. You linger in the village square, the torchlight dimming as the crowd thins their murmurs, fading into the chilly dusk. The oak tree looms its rope, now gone, but the weight of the pig's execution hangs heavy like damp fog. Your boots scuff the mud, and you drift toward the village hall's shadowed entrance where a faint candle glow spills out. Inside, a lone figure hunches over a table, a scribe, his quill scratching as he records the trial's outcome, turning the sow's grim fate into an official mark of medieval justice. You're about to step into his world, where ink and parchment bind this bizarre bureaucracy, and it's a quiet, meticulous task that feels oddly profound after the square's chaos. You slip inside the hall's smoky air, softer now, and hover near the scribe's table. He's younger than you expected, his face pale under a mop of dark hair, his fingers stained with ink as he writes in a ledger. The sow guilty was hanged this day. He scribes his quill, moving with care, as if each word carries the village's grief. You're struck by the contrast, yesterday's clamor reduced to neat lines. Historical records like those from 15th century French archives show scribes were vital in animal trials, their ledgers preserving verdicts for legal and church scrutiny, ensuring no pig's death went undocumented. This guy's the trial's final gatekeeper, sealing the sow's story. He glances up, catching your stare, and offers a tired nod. Long day, he mutters, dipping his quill in a horn of ink. You nod back, noticing the ledger's pages filled with other trials, cows, goats, even a rooster once. A quirky tidbit, some scribes added doodles to their records like pigs with halos or nooses, a sly jab at the absurdity. You scan the page, hoping for a sketch, and whisper to the baker who's lingered nearby. Think he'll draw her with wings, he snickers, only if she's flying to court. The pious woman's gone, but a stray glare from a passing clerk keeps you in check. The scribe's job is no mere clerical task. He's weaving the trial into the village's history. His words a bridge between the execution's raw emotion and the cold permanence of record. He notes the judge's verdict, the witnesses' tales, even the mother's grief, his quill pausing only to blot a smudge. You're impressed by his focus, though his eyes betray exhaustion, maybe from wrestling with the trial's moral weight. Historians still argue whether scribes saw their role as sacred or bureaucratic. Some say they honored God's order, others call them cogs in a superstitious machine. You're starting to see him as both his ledger, a quiet anchor for a village unmoored by loss. He sprinkles sand to dry the ink, the soft patter loud in the near-empty hall, and closes the ledger with a sigh. The pig's story is done, etched forever, or until the rats get the parchment. Remember that omen-checking judge? This scribe's work feels more grounded, yet just as tied to the village's need for closure. A kid peeks in, whispering, "Did the pig sign the book?" You mutter with a hoofprint, maybe. His giggle cuts the stillness, but the scribe's already packing his quill, his task complete. You step back, the hall's candles guttering, casting shadows on the now empty pen's spot. The scribe's ledger lingers in your mind, a testament to the trial's strange permanence. You're about to gauge the village's reaction, to see how they carry the sow's death into their daily rhythm. For now, you rub your hands against the creeping chill, the echo of the pig's final squeal long gone, and brace for the next twist in this medieval saga, wondering if the village will find peace, or just more questions in the wake of this odd justice. You step out of the village hall, the scribe's quill scratches fading as you re-enter the torchlit square, where the night's chill wraps around you like a damp cloak. The oak tree stands silent, its grim role done, and the pig's pen is gone carted off with her remains. The village hums with a softer pulse, now murmurs of neighbors, the clink of a tavern's mugs, a dog's distant bark, but the trial's shadow lingers. You're about to gauge the community's reaction, to see how they carry the sow's death into their daily rhythm. And it's a patchwork of relief, unease, and whispered doubts that paints this medieval world's heart. You wander toward this tavern, its glow spilling onto the muddy path, and slip inside where villagers cluster around tables, their faces lit by rushlights. A farmer, his mug half drained, toasts justice done, but his voice lacks conviction, as if the pig's hanging didn't erase the child's loss. A woman nearby, her shawl tight, mutters about cursed beasts and crosses herself, eyeing the door like the sow's ghost might barge in. Historical records like those from 15th century French chronicles show animal trials often split communities. Some felt cleansed. Others questioned the point, grappling with grief no rope could resolve. This village feels caught in that divide, the trial's closure fragile. You lean against a beam, the tavern's smoky warmth easing the chill, and overhear a young man, maybe a shepherd, grumble. Guillaume's fence was the real crime. A few nod, and you sense a shift, blame creeping toward human failings. A quirky tidbit. Some villages held penance feasts after animal executions, roasting the beast to reclaim power. You glance at a plate of pork on a table and whisper to the baker who's nursing a mug. "Think that's our defendant?" He snickers. "Hope they spiced her better than the trial." A tavern maid's glare, pious woman's understudy, clearly quiets you, but the mood's too raw for levity. The mother's absence looms her grief, a silent thread weaving through the chatter. You catch a weaver at another table, her hands still, as she speaks of the child, suggesting the trial was God's will, but no comfort. Others disagree, arguing the pig's death restored order, their voices rising, until the tavern keeper barks for peace. Historians still argue whether these reactions healed or divided. Some say trials unified villages through shared ritual, others call them a distraction from systemic issues like poverty or neglect. You're starting to see the village as a tapestry frayed by loss, but stitched by this odd justice, even if the seams are shaky. You step outside, the tavern's warmth fading, and notice a few villagers lingering by the oak, their faces unreadable, maybe praying, maybe doubting. A kid kicks a stone, muttering, "Pig didn't fix nothing." You nod, saying, "Tough case for a sow." His shrug carries the village's weight, a mix of resignation and restless hope. Remember that ledger's neat lines. They can't capture this mess of human hearts where closure battles questions no verdict can answer. You wander toward the village's edge, the square's torches dimming the night's quiet, broken only by a distant owl. The trial's done, but its ripples remain, and you're ready to reflect on its strange place in history, a final step in this medieval saga. For now, you pull your cloak tight, the echo of the pig's squeal long gone, and brace for the last twist, wondering if the village will carry this story as a lesson or a scar. You drift from the village square, the tavern's glow fading as you wander toward the outskirts, where the night's chill seeps through your cloak. and the distant hoot of an owl punctuates the silence. The oak tree, the pen, the pig, they're gone, but the trial's weight clings like damp wool woven into the village's rhythm of grief and gossip. You're about to reflect on the trial's strange place in history, a bizarre footnote that reveals the medieval mind's wrestle with justice, faith, and chaos. It's a moment to step back, to see this sow's story as more than a village drama, and you're ready to untangle its threads, carrying the pig's grunts and the mother's sobs into a broader tapestry. You pause by a low stone wall, the village's lights faint behind you, and think of the trial's cast, the cleric's quill, the attorney's plea, the judge's verdict, all part of a system that treated a pig like a criminal. Historical records like those from 15th century European courts show animal trials peaked in times of crisis, plagues, famines, or social unrest, when communities sought order through ritual. This sow's trial, born of a child's death, was a way to tame the untamable, to give shape to a village's pain when fences failed and grief overwhelmed. You're struck by its logic, however twisted, a mirror of a world where God and devils lurked in every shadow. The trial's absurdity summons as lawyers a noose for a pig, feels almost modern in its theatricality, like a medieval reality show. A quirky tidbit: some towns kept animal trial records for centuries, trotted out to settle later disputes or scare naughty livestock. You imagine a dusty ledger, the sow's name inked beside a cow's, and whisper to the night, "Think she's famous in pig heaven." The owl hoots as if mocking your joke, and you grin, missing the baker's snark, but glad for the quiet. Historians still argue whether these trials were legal quirks or cultural necessities. Some say they enforced accountability, others call them a desperate grasp for meaning in a brutal world. You see both a village healing through ritual, yet dodging deeper flaws like Guillaume's fence or poverty's grind. You lean against the wall, the stone cold under your hands, and picture the village moving on tavern debates, fading, the mother's grief softening the sow's story, shrinking to a cautionary tale. The trial's legacy isn't in the noose or the ledger, but in what it reveals: a community's need to name the unnameable, to find justice in a world where accidents cut deeper than swords. Remember that holy hog defense. It's a spark of hope, a reminder that even in this odd bureaucracy, someone dared to argue for mercy, however futile. The pig's gone, but her trial lingers, a strange lens on a time when humans and beasts shared the dock. You turn back the village's lights, a faint promise of warmth, ready to leave this saga behind. The trial's done its lessons, etched in your mind like the scribe's ink, a testament to a world both alien and achingly human. The night wraps you tighter now, the village's hum, a distant lullaby. As you tread the path homeward, your boots soft on the earth. The stars prick the sky, their light gentle like candles in that smoky hall, and you feel the trial's weight ease its sharp edges, smoothed by time's quiet hand. The sow, the mother, the judge, they blur into a single story, one of loss and longing, of a village seeking peace in the shadow of pain. Your cloak brushes the grass. The owl's call fades, and the world feels smaller, softer, as if the pig's grunts and the mother's sobs have drifted to the stars. Let the day's clamor rest. Let the night cradle you, and as you find your bed, let this strange tale weave into your dreams, a whisper of justice, mud, and mercy.